So good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock, it's May the 30th and we're live here in Edinburgh with Joe and Mike's virtual tours. So we thought we'd bring you to this little area. It's out of town, we're in the southwest of Edinburgh and we're on a campus, or one of the campuses of Napier University. And it's one of these places where you think, if only this building could talk, the stories that it could tell. It does feature a lot it's got a lot of history. It features in a lot of stories, a lot of movies as well, and it's part of the Napier University. And remember, in one of our previous talks, we mentioned there are 4 universities here in Edinburgh. There's Edinburgh University itself, there's Heriot-Watt University, there's Napier University, and Queen Margaret University. So we're at the Craiglockhart campus of Napier University. We'll talk about John Napier as well, because again, it's all got such historical connections with people going back in history, with poets and the whole thing. But we just thought we'd like to have a look at the building. I'll tell you a little bit about the building itself. Yeah. Mike and I have been working really hard, and this is the first Monday afternoon that we've actually had off together for about 2 months.
It is, it's a long time, yeah.
And I also want to do some shout outs later on to some friends over in New Jersey. I spent a great time in New York City for the Tartan Week as well, and I know there are some people who we met on the parade who watch us as well, so thumbs up to them. We'll give a wee shout out as well. But I just wanted to see if you can get a panel of the grounds here, Mike, because the grounds are actually quite spectacular. These old trees here, they've got these copper beeches here. I mean, they must be hundreds of years old, and it kind of evokes the history of this place. The building itself started off as a hydropathic hotel. Now, hydropathy was very popular at the end of the Victorian period. So we're talking about the 1880s, 1890s. And people would come up to Scotland to take the waters because there are some mineral wells very close to here. And lots of activities were arranged in this hydropathic hotel. And they popped up all over Scotland. They had a swimming pool in here, they had Turkish baths, they had lots of activities here, and it was mainly set for entertainment and health and well-being of the Victorian gentry. However, it didn't do too well in terms of making money, and it actually went bust. It was taken over by the owners of the Dunblane Hydro, which was very successful for a little while, but then comes the First World War. So in 1914 to 1918, the First World War here in Europe, and this building was requisitioned by the War Department and it was used as a hospital. And I'm going to talk a wee bit more about this, but I want to walk up here just to show you some pictures of the hills in the background here. You can see they were actually in one of the leafy suburbs, and I don't know if you can pick up the perspective, but you've got the Pentland Hills at the back of us here. We've got, so we're in the southwest. Let's go on a bit of the building itself. So we mentioned it was hydropathic and then it was requisitioned. It was used here for officers of the British Army who were suffering from shell shock. And Edinburgh was seen as one of the places where the advancement of medical science and how to deal, we would call it PTSD now. But it was, people were brought here for various reasons, for shell shock, for injuries. They were brought up here to recuperate. 2 of the main people I want to talk about here are the war poets. Now, I know a lot of British people will know the war poets, and I know they're not that well known outside, but there's a group of poets who wrote about the war, and they were actually mainly anti-war poets. They wrote about their experiences in the trenches, and the conditions were awful. But 2 of the officers I want to talk about here is one's called Wilfred Owen, and one's called Siegfried Sassoon. They came from quite different backgrounds. Sassoon actually came from an established, they were known as the Rothschilds of the East because they made all their fortune for trading out in the East Indies. So he came from a very, very Wilfred Owen came from a different background. He came from more of a working class background. His father worked in the railways, but he worked his way through and got through to colleges and through to universities as well. 2 different backgrounds. Both of them ended up here because they were injured during the Second World War. Wilfred Owen was actually physically injured and mentally as well because he had PTSD, whereas Siegfried Sassoon, however, became militantly anti-war, and he wrote a poem, an anti-war poem. he actually out in the trenches with his men. He was the leader of the men, and when he saw the effects of the battle, he actually wrote a letter to the government, and the letter was actually read out in the House of Commons. He thought he was going to be court-martialed for his anti-war stance, but another war poet, Rupert Graves, actually wrote a letter on his behalf and said, no, he's actually suffering from shell shock. He needs to go to Edinburgh, to the clinic here. So both of them were in here together, and they started to strike up this friendship. So Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon were based in here, and this university here now has a collection for the war poets, which is not well visited and it's not well known about, but it's a brilliant little collection, because this is where some of Wilfred Owen's best poems were written. Wilfred Owen, most of his poetry was actually written or posthumously, or published posthumously, because after he recovered in inverted commas, because they were sent back out to the trenches, but he was sent back out and he died in the trenches, and he died about 6 days before the armistice was signed. And the saddest thing was, his mother got the letter telling her that her son had died in the trenches on November the 11th, which is the day the armistice was signed. Sassoon went on to live a long life, but he spent the whole of his life being a pacifist and anti-war. And I just want to show you the little sign up here. You can see that he died 1918, Wilfred Owen, just a few days before the end of the war. Sassoon went on to live a nice long life, but they became close friends. They influenced each other a lot in their poetry while they were here recuperating.
Was there not a story, Joe, about Sassoon trying to do something to Owen so that he wouldn't have to return to the fighting?
He did.
Injure him or something, if I remember.
He was supporting him to try various ways of not letting him, to try and stop him from going back. And one of the things they said, if you do some self-injury, but Owen wouldn't buy that as well.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's a sad time for I mean, when you read the poem, that if you want to read one of the best poems of Wilfred Owen, it's a Dulce et decorum est, sweet and fitting to die, and it's called por patria. The actual title comes from a Roman poet called Horace. So Horace wrote the first poem. He wrote that line, how good and sweet and fitting it is to die for your country. And so the poem that Wilfred Owen had written was actually more of a attack on war, saying it's not sweet to die for your country. The conditions that they were terrible. So I would highly recommend any viewer just to Google Dulce et decorum est. It's one of the best anti-war poems that I think I've ever read. So Sassoon went on to write quite a few poems. I've got a couple in my backpack here. I'll bring them out. One of the famous ones was Absolution. He never really forgave the British establishment. Although he came from the British establishment, he never forgave the British establishment for sending these people to war, because they had seen conditions, and it was during those conditions that Sassoon actually switched from being part of the establishment to being anti-establishment, and he spent his whole life in the Labour Party.
I just had a good comment from Rosa, thank you for that. She says the writer Pat Barker deals with this subject in an anthology called Regeneration.
Yeah, and it was actually filmed on location here as well. And again, Pat Barker's books, there's a collection of Pat Barker, she's being honoured in here as well. So it all relates to that. And also, currently, there is a movie out called Benediction. I don't know if it's released outside the UK yet. Peter Capaldi, who I love, I think is a great Scottish actor, he actually plays the older Sassoon. But it's about the life and times of Siegfried Sassoon, and it only got released I think 2 weeks ago, and it's called Benediction. So it may currently be on cinemas. I think it might be on Netflix as well, or soon, but it deals with the history of the war poets here at Craiglockhart campus. And again, after it was requisitioned by military after the First World War, it went the Ministry of Defence gave it up, the Ministry of War gave it up, and it was then taken over by a chapter of the nuns, a convent of nuns of the Sacred Heart. So this became a convent, and after a few years of being a convent, it then turned into a girls' college, a female college, for young women who wanted to teach in primary schools, specifically to teach in the Catholic primary schools. And I mentioned before that I went to Catholic schools, so I had a couple of compatriots or people who were in school with me, and they came up here to go to primary school teaching, and we used to visit them, and they used to have, they used to have parties, but they always said about 8 o'clock the nuns would come round and all the boys used to jump out the windows. And they say they always remember they had the strict sisters. So this was this started off as a college of education for primary school teaching here, and strictly for the Catholics, run by the nuns. So the convent turned over to be teaching order as well.
We've got another wee comment from Rosa. Thank you for the comments, Rosa. She says Jonathan Pryce, the leading role in the film.
In Regeneration?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, I don't think
it's the one that you were talking about, yeah.
I don't think it's Jonathan Pryce. It's a younger. Peter Capaldi plays the older side, and maybe it's Jonathan Pryce. He's a young, new actor. Okay. It's very good, very good. Yeah. But thanks for that. That's great. Yeah.
Another thing I just wanted to chip in is about Violet Jacob, who's another well-known, well, maybe not so well-known sometimes, but a great genius of literature, who wrote a poem which has been put to music called Halloween, and actually is comparing the fireworks to the bombing and what the soldiers had to put up with. And she actually lost a son during the First World War, so the parents show an example of parental creativity coming from the loss of a child in that terrible war. Yeah. And
I mean, it's just amazing that it actually took place in this building and the history of it. I mean, as I say, the buildings could talk. I mean, these people walked around here. There is a trail around this area, and it's known as a War Poets Trail. So you can pick up a leaflet and you can walk around here. And it's one of these lesser known parts of Edinburgh, but it's absolutely beautiful to walk around here. I mean, you can hardly hear any traffic. You can hear the bird song. We've got the trees and we've got beautiful views. And even in the distance, you can see Edinburgh Castle.
It's looking spectacular today from this view, which is not always a view that people are so familiar with. And from this hill as well, you're getting a nice panorama there, panoramic view in the distance. Yeah.
I mean, Edinburgh is defined by its hills, and we are here with two of the major hills of Edinburgh as well as the Pentland Hills.
Yeah.
Just going back to the building itself, so it's called Napier University. Napier University itself started off as a college, a technical college in the 1960s, and it was quite a new technical college here in Edinburgh. And over the time it developed and emerged with other colleges and started to grow. The first campus was actually in an area called Merchiston, and Merchiston has got an old castle there which goes back to the 1500s, and the campus is built around this castle. Now Merchiston is important because in this castle, John Napier, after whom this university is named, was actually born in that castle. So this is where we get the name Napier University, or Napier College to begin with. Now, who was John Napier? Well, he was a famous Scottish scientist. He lived in the end of the 1500s, beginning of the 1600s, and he invented logarithms. Now, those of you with long memories who have been to high school will know of the time of opening up those books and doing all those logarithms. I don't know if anybody can give us a thumbs up, see if they remember doing any mathematics at school and having to do log tables.
Oh, I'm one that remembers that for sure.
But I always looked at them when I was doing it. It was kind of like a crossword, because you were working with all these numbers and you had to find a solution, and the solution always came out right. And I never questioned as to who invented logarithms until later on and realised it was he invented these. I mean, the brain that man must have had back in the 16th century to come out with something like logarithms. I mean, it was hard enough in the 20th century to learn how to use them. Never mind how to invent them as well. I mean, that's just mind-blowing. So it just gave you the great geniuses that have evolved and that we benefited from the work that they did. And Napier is also very funny as well, because he was also known to dabble in the occult and necromancy. So he had all this thing to do with dead bodies as well. And he had a pet cockerel. And the cockerel was black. It was a pet black cockerel that he was famous for. And he used to tell his servants that this cockerel had secret powers. And some of his stuff got stolen, and he got all the servants together, and he said that I'm going to put you in a room with the cockerel, and I will know who it is. That the cockerel will identify you, and the cockerel will tell me. But what he did was, he actually covered it was a black cockerel, but he covered it in soot. So the person who was guilty did not want the cockerel to name them, so the person who was guilty would kill the cockerel. So he put the cockerel in, and he heard the cockerel squawk, and he opened the door, and of course the person who stole it was all covered in soot because they were trying to catch the cockerel, so he was able to catch it. So they thought the cockerel and him had spiritualist powers, so he was known as to dabble in the occult as well. So
that is so clever. Yeah.
He got accused of being an occultist and a necromancer as well. He's got a great history, and again, it's all to do with the Napier University here. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
On the other campus, near where I live, there's another campus, and there's a statue to John Napier there as well, who's actually designed by a Ukrainian sculptor as well.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So let's move around a wee bit longer. I'm just going to take this time, and I want to say some thank yous. I was over in New York, Mike, for the Tartan Week, and it was absolutely brilliant.
I'm so envious.
It was brilliant. It was such a great day, and the sun shone on us all day. But on the parade, Mike, we were walking down in the parade, and there were people on the sidelines all shouting and waving, and so I was waving back. And they was like, no, come here, come here, come here. So I went over, and they said, we watch your show every week. So we've got a fan club. I think they were Scottish and American, and I think the Scots were there as well. So not only have we got a fan club, we have a travelling fan club.
Well, it's like this hat of mine, and you're not seeing it just now. I'm behind the camera, but this woolly hat I wear. And sometimes people recognise me in the distance and start waving and say, John Mike's Spiritual Tours.
Yeah.
And it happens to be because, in Edinburgh, we've got a lot of people, locals also, who watch the tours because people are interested in some of our hidden histories that we guide. And I'd like to say, Joe, isn't it the case, because we're locals, we tend to take people in places where you wouldn't find in a guidebook sometimes, and talk about characters that, maybe kind of, what's the word now, explain Edinburgh, interpret Edinburgh in a better way sometimes. Not taking down guidebooks, but that's what is good about hiring a
blue badge guide,
to do your walking tour, yeah.
So, enough about us. Let's talk about the building again, because I'm going to show you the juxtaposition between the old building and the new. So we'll just turn around here. This looks like a big bug eye, doesn't it? I always think it looks like a big compound insect eye. And we'll get a step down, we'll get a better focus on it.
Yeah.
So this campus here focuses mainly on the business school. So this is the business school of the Napier University. Focuses on doing the MBAs and degrees in business. And this is the lecture theatre here in front of us.
And how old is that, Joe? Do you know, when was that?
This was opened in the 1990s, I believe. So it closed for a while. I've got to mention another connection here, Mike, and you're probably not going to like this, but it's also got another connection with a famous woman in Britain. You know who I'm going to mention?
Yes. Yeah.
She's been in the news recently again. It was opened in the university, I believe, was opened when it became inaugurated as a university in 1984. So it went from college status. No, 1992 it became a university, but 1984, when this college became part of the Napier College, so the old Teachers Training College became part of Napier in 1984. This building had repurposed and it was reopened by the Right Honourable Margaret Thatcher. No
And
comments,
there is
please.
a statue which has just been unveiled down
In Grantham,
Grantham,
in
yeah.
Lincolnshire.
And it's a bit sad because they can't actually stop people throwing eggs at it.
I know it's.
I mean, is that not?
Why on earth would they put a statue up Maggot Thatch? Why not put it inside a building where people would actually go in? If you're going to put it on the street, you know it's going to get desecrated. You just know
Yeah,
it. I mean,
yeah.
it doesn't take a genius to work that out. But some people are still unforgiven, shall we say?
Do you know what to
by
mention?
a lot
We're
of
talking
people.
about statues. Do you know what to mention Elsie Ingalls? Because I believe there is going to be a statue now, and some of our Blue Badge Guide colleagues have been raising money to fund this new statue of Elsie Ingalls.
Yeah, they've
Yeah.
had a full campaign on Elsie Ingalls. She was a nurse during the First World War as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, connections with the war poets there. She's set up the nursing practices, a real nursing practices, recruited lots of people, went out to fight and to tend the injured in the front line. And I wouldn't say she was forgotten, but there are no statues, very few statues to women in Edinburgh. And the campaign has also been backed up by our Blue Badge colleagues. And I do believe that they've just got permission to
think
build
so.
the
Yeah,
statue.
yeah,
So it's been
yeah.
successful again, and having people campaigning to recognise some of the other heroes of Scotland. And Elsie Ingalls,
yeah.
I think it's going to be built on the Royal Mile as well,
Right,
because I think
yeah.
an early hospital of hers.
Yeah.
Because she developed the whole idea. We've talked before about the women
Talked
who
about it before,
revolutionised medicine in one of her previous ones, but Elsie Ingalls kind of took it a step further.
Yeah, yeah. No, well done those who've
Yeah.
done that, raised
Yeah.
money for that. Yeah.
So we'll just take it down here, Mike,
Yeah.
and maybe we can get a scan of the hills here. We mentioned the hills of Edinburgh, and we've got
Yeah.
two here. We've got the Craiglockhart Hill, and we've got the Craig House Hill.
Yeah.
And there is the remains of a Pictish fort on this top of this hill that you're looking at right now.
Wow. Yeah.
And they're all open, you can walk all over them. The one you're looking at right now is actually, well, both of them are part of a golf course. There's golf courses on both of them as well.
Right, yeah. Beautiful views, for sure, yeah. Well, maybe
So-
take a more distant view of the architecture.
Yeah,
of
so we
the
take a wee
building,
distant
yeah.
view.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful campus to come and walk around. I wouldn't say it's on the tourist beat at all, but it's one of the things that we like to do is to take you off the beaten track and show you other little gems and historical connections, not only the connections with the people, but also the history of the buildings as well, because I think it's a gorgeous building to have to look at. And it's a great juxtaposition of the old and the new.
Yeah,
And this gives you, and it kind of sums up Scotland, doesn't it?
it does.
It's funny because I had these a group of kids today, all from Argentina, and we got talking about computer games, and they were all very surprised that Scotland is a leader in the development and technology of computer gaming, and that Dundee University was the first university in the world to offer a degree course in computer gaming. And they're all talking about Grand Theft Auto. Doesn't really mean much to me, but it means a lot to the kids. And I took them past the building, Rockstar North,
Oh yes.
and they were, to them, I was talking about geology and history. The big thing for them was Rockstar North building, and that was their mecca. It's
Yeah.
like, it's like something for everybody, basically.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. Another connection here, and again to make it more relevant, is that it's now exactly 30 years, as from March, that Napier became a university. So it got the authority to call itself a university 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It's got 2 or 3 campuses around the city, so it's not all on one campus. It's split around, very much like Edinburgh University. It's split around the whole place. Heriot Watt, the university, is on the campus, all in one place. Queen Margaret is on another campus, but Napier and Edinburgh are distributed throughout the city in various campuses. And also it's been elected or nominated as being the top modern university in Scotland, and it is in the Times list of best universities. I think it's the students who fill that one in, but so
right.
there's the
Right.
very, very true to the alma mater basically in here as well.
Yeah.
Big, it's only got about 16,000 students in it, but it's very international. So people from all over the world come here.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's nice, and I hope people are hearing the bird song. There's a bit of bird song, and also the nice colours over there, and the
Yep,
garden
lovely,
area.
beautiful
Yeah,
laburnum.
yeah.
The laburnum trees are just, and we'll just take a wee walk down here. We're
There's a wee
finished.
walk down this
Yeah.
bit, yeah.
We just finished with the rhododendrons and the laburnum here because it is a spectacular place.
Yeah, sometimes we've got a later season, Joe, don't we, in Scotland,
Yeah.
and things come out a bit later than maybe they do in the south of England because of the climate and such like. So,
And some things don't grow down as things grow up here that can't grow down south and vice versa because of the acidity in the soils.
Yeah.
It's different. But
really
the,
close
but
up. Yeah.
the rhododendrons are gorgeous at the moment, and the laburnum trees are just dripping. I mean, I've got wisteria at home, and this is the best year ever for the wisteria as well. So, just great growing conditions.
Oh, yeah.
So I hope you enjoyed a little pop-up little tour. We covered the war poets, covered the history of Napier University and its connection with John Napier itself. War poets, I think, because would really recommend reading that poem, Dulce et decorum est, from Wilfred Owen. Also because it's linked to the new film that's come out, the new movie that's come out called Benediction, so hopefully we're giving you a wee bit of context. And if you're watching the movie of Benediction, or if you're watching Regeneration by Pat Barker, the movie, or reading the books, now you'll know exactly where these people were. And thanks very much for reminding us about Pat Barker as well, because I think there's another film being made on one of the other campuses here, again based on a Pat Barker book as well. So I think that's planned for the summer, or it might actually be in post-production, but there is a new Pat Barker movie coming out, or a movie on her book.
Quite good timing, bearing in mind the times we're living in just now as well.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Okay.
So stay tuned for pop-ups. Mike and I will try where we can get a Monday afternoon, 3 o'clock, and we'll get some other places, and hopefully we'll be able to meet each other maybe up north, and we can do something out of town as well. But we'll be collaborating with each other to get some dates in the diary. So thank you again for joining us, really appreciate it. Thank you everybody in New Jersey who made my visit to the East Coast absolutely spectacular. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I ate my way from New York up to Chicago. I came back and I got COVID when I came back, so I had jet lag and COVID. So I've not been able to lose any of those pounds that I put on when I'm in the US. But I am working hard, and because I'm doing lots of walking tours, hopefully I will lose a few pounds as well. So I want to say a big thank you, and thanks for watching us again, and I hope you enjoyed it.
I'll just come in and say cheerio as well. So all the best, and take care. And
Take care.
We'll let you know when we're going to come back again.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll think of some other places. Thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of your day.